Welcome back to the Money Script Podcast. It's your host, Johan Say. Y'all know all my names already. I'm tired of explaining this whole thing to everyone, but I have someone with a very, very eccentric name today. I'm going to practice rolling my R's. This is going to be fun. But before we get to that, I just want to say, welcome to winter. I mean, you might be listening to this in the summertime, but it's winter. I woke up this morning and it was 37 degrees. Now, for those of you that live in the north, you're like, that's nothing. But for those of us in the south, 37 it's cold. However, the leaves are still green on the trees, though, so we still haven't had that whole transition to fall thing. But I continue to look forward to that. So again, welcome to the Money Script Podcast, where we talk about everything that has anything to do with money. We are going to be going pretty deep on kind of living your dream, I believe, today. I think that's what we're going to talk about. I mean, you never know. Yeah, she's just going to come into the studio and we're going to have a little fun. I did notice today that the Facebook change to Meta, whatever that means, has been taking over everywhere. I actually took a little peek on Instagram today, and as I was logging in, I saw the little Meta symbol, and I found it very interesting that Facebook has just kind of changed its whole persona. Apparently they're not even called Facebook anymore. I don't know what to call them. I also just don't know what the Meta is. I think it has something to do with the metaverse, but I think that has something to do with Marvel. I'm so confused. Maybe we're in the metaverse right now. I wonder what the metaverse is going to have to do with like things like money and will there be like maybe that's where cryptocurrencies will actually be able to have a life, is you can actually use them as a currency, because you can't really do that now. But you could actually use them as a currency in the metaverse. It's all new to me, and by the time you hear this, who knows? Maybe you are sitting in the metaverse with your meta personality and listening to the show. And if you are, then you can, go ahead and tell me how silly I was for not understanding where the world has gone or where we are now. It reminds me of that movie. Oh, Ready Player One. Maybe that's what the metaverse is. Anyways, we'll get to more of that later. So again, today I have the wonderful, the talented, the roll your R's. I'm gonna do this right. Are you ready for this? I have Eviana Vergara. Yeah, je parle français. So the Spanish is new to me. I'm working on it. How did I do?
You did great.
I did great.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was
Yeah.
working on it, and she is the host of the Evielution podcast. Evilution, not evolution. Evilution. I'm sure there's a play on words that she will share more with us. But Evie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jans. Thank you so much for having me. It's really awesome to share someone who also has an interesting name, and you kind of have to like describe it every single time because that's kind of how it is for me. It's like, oh, what's your name? Is it Evie? I'm like, no, it's Eviana. And, sometimes I go E for sure. It just depends, really.
See, you're like me.
Um,
You got three
I'm
different
on this.
ways to say one name.
Exactly.
See, I am not alone in the world.
You're not alone. When I like jump in and, as an introduction for my podcast, I'm like, yo, this is Eviana, or yo, this is Evie, yo, so it really, I feel that for you.
Yeah, yeah. But as long as we know who we are, it's good. It's just
So
we
all
like
that
to give
matters.
people choices. We don't want them to be stuck with just one way of saying our name. We want to, keep some excitement in their life, right?
Exactly. And you got to, keep people on their toes as well, because
Exactly.
they're like, wait, I thought your name was this. I'm like, that's also my name. And everyone kind of just gets a different side of you, which was actually kind of the point when I first started the podcast, because it was more of a play on my name, right? Because it's also very nerdy because Eevee is a Pokemon. And so
Oh,
when that's kind of how I say my name, like, oh, my name's Eevee, like the Pokemon. And it depends on the generation. Some people get it, some people don't. And Eevee, that specific Pokemon, it has like the most evolutions, which means that it involves in different ways. And so I'm like, oh, that's a perfect way to describe my podcast, because it's also the evolution of myself and the evolution of how I progress as a creative, as an artist. And so I want it to be someplace that people can listen to and see the evolution of themselves as well, because it's basically a podcast for creatives who want to learn about being an artist and what that kind of life is like. I have always kind of felt a weird way, like saying like, oh, I'm a creative, because usually in the grand scheme of things, being a creative wasn't always something to be like kind of very proud about. It was more like, oh, you're a starving artist kind of thing. And so I always stayed away from that and mainly kept all my creative projects as a side hobby, as something that I just did for fun and that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I started doing photography as for fun, and then realizing that I could actually get paid to do it. And it was the strangest thing, because I loved taking photos and was able to start my own side hustle with that. Right. And then it made me think, I'm like, what else is possible with doing things that are creative, that are fun, and I can actually make money and start building a different way of my own success and my own level of what I feel makes me like a person that's worthy of being creative, that's worthy of living this kind of lifestyle, rather than the normal 9 to 5 kind of living.
The normal 9 to 5 kind of living. Hey, now, no knock out there to our listeners who are in the 9 to 5, but you know that more than likely you'd rather not be in that 9 to 5 sort of thing. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you love what you do. Again, I'm not trying to make people just turn off this podcast right now and say I enjoy my 9 to 5, but we got to admit the one source of income, where someone else controls how much you make. You got to show up at a certain time, leave at a certain time. I mean, in 2021, that's just, I mean, that's not a way to live, not fully, in my opinion. So tell us a little bit about when you discovered that it was okay to be a creative and how you were able to connect that with, oh, wait, I can make money from doing this. So when did that happen?
I think it started happening when I was in college, and I needed a way to fund myself through school that didn't, because I think for me, there's nothing wrong with the 9 to 5, but sometimes it doesn't support you if you're a student in college, right? And you're trying to find your way, like, well, how do I apply for a job if I don't have experience, right? That's always that chicken and egg game. It's like, oh, well, you can apply for this, but you need X amount of experience, but then you also need a degree. And I didn't want to have to choose either or. So I try to make both happen. So how can I get my degree and still make money so that I can gain experience? So then I kind of just started hustling on the weekends by getting on set on a film production and being a production assistant through someone that I had met. And they said, hey, why don't you just do this on the weekends? And I'd never thought about it.
You weren't handling the guns though, right?
No.
Okay.
on set of your films.
Yeah, that wasn't you. You weren't not in charge.
No, okay. Not me. I was just in charge of crafty and making sure, people were on time and things like that. And so I just started seeing other people that were making money just creating things. And it didn't occur to me until I was looking for something that I could keep going while still being in school. And that's when I started diving into like, oh, wow, like someone just asked me to take photos for their graduation. And it was just for fun. But then other people started asking me, right? Once you start posting on social media, then the whole crowd goes wild. They're like, oh my gosh, like, where do I get these photos? And I started being able to just start offering my services as a creative. And I was able to do that on the weekend. So I would edit on the weekends. I would do all my shoots throughout the week and then go to class. It was just so funny. I was like, hey, I have class after. I'll meet you here at the quad. We'll take photos and then I'll jump up to my next class. So it was really cool being able to integrate it into my life. And that gave me that new sense of like, oh, I can live the life that I want and be able to create and make money. So it was starting to see that I can combine both. And then I kind of thought about, well, how do I want to do this once I'm done with school? Is this still the direction that I want to take? And that was hard because then when you're done with school, you have a lot more time. So you can take on a full-time job. And that's what I did. I was working at a tech company as an intern.
You got a 9 to 5.
I did, because that's what everyone says. You're like, all right, I'll try it out. Like let's do this. So I started off as an intern, and for a tech company it's so funny because I didn't even know tech was a thing until I just got a call from an application that I had sent in for an internship. And they're like, yeah, you have this, resume experience that ties in with this tech company, and do you want an interview? And I said, yes. Okay, cool. I don't know what to do, but sure, just hire me. Because I was just like a student at that time and I had no clue what I was doing. So yeah, I got the internship. And then from there, I was just kind of meeting people and then, seeing like, wait, you just animate stuff and you get paid to do this, So I started to see a different level of where your creations and your creativity can take you, even in that type of like position of a 9 to 5 kind of job, but more in the tech industry. So, they had like free hot chocolate and stuff like that. And I was that the free food got to me. I was like, wait, the food is free. Like, I don't have to pay for this. Like, it was just so wild. Like, wait, there's a gym here. I can like, it was just mind blowing because it kind of twisted my thought of what a 9 to 5 was on its head in the tech industry.
Now, are you still in the tech industry?
I'm actually not. So after I would say 2.5 years, I just got completely burnt out because it was so much work, especially going through the pandemic and everyone just being at home and, such a very turbulent time. It really affected my mental health, and depression is something that I had gone through for a very long time. And so having to keep up, it just felt like I was sprinting a marathon. And
That
after a
doesn't
while,
sound fun.
yeah.
As someone that used to run cross country many, many moons ago, sprinting a marathon, just that sounds painful. I've never heard that term before. That did not feel good when you said it. Whoa, okay.
Yeah, that's definitely at that point for me because I didn't have the tools. I didn't know what boundaries were. I didn't know how to communicate well with, the people around me about what was happening in my life because growing up, that's not something that we talk about openly. It's not, you can't just say, hey, I'm going to call off. I'm feeling really sad and depressed today. So
No, it's like
it
go
just,
to school, cry about it when you get home. Yeah, no, yeah,
exactly. And so after that, I was just very frustrated. I'm like, there has to be another way that I can still thrive as a creative without feeling like I need to give, 100% to one thing and not have enough left over for what I want in my own life.
got it, got it. So you made you, so you just transitioned to being a full creative. I mean, what did you how did you reconcile this inner battle that you were having with college and finding this open space to be creative and fun on the weekends to 9 to 5, but still evolving, or excuse me, evolving. Did I say it right? Through that, how did you then transition to where you are today?
So the way that happened, once I started to realize that maybe this is not the direction I want to go in, I kind of wanted to be strategic in that, okay, how can I plan ahead? And then from there, it was just getting support from peers and other people about how do I save? What do I do now? What choices do I have from here? And a lot of it was just like have some emergency fund, right? Just a little cushion so that I could give myself enough time to figure things out. So
Mm,
that's what I did. Once I got that like full-time position after being an intern, it was just really a great experience. And then I started to get to work. Like, okay, I'm not sure what the next 6 months look like, but I know that I can save as much as possible and be able to at least have a cushion and figure things along the way. The good thing was that I already had tools like knowing how to do photography. I knew how to create newsletters and just already had different sets of skills that I knew that I could just transfer to something else. So then I just started to transition out. Once, I felt like, what, I think I'm ready to do this. I also wanted a big change of environment. So I chose to move from LA to Oregon. And that was something that was completely unheard of for me because a lot of people just always assume that, I would just stay in LA because that's where everyone moves to. But then realizing that I wanted just a different pace of life. I wanted to slow things down. And when I had been to Oregon, it was such a different space. I'm like, okay, I think right now what I need is a slow down, a spot to regroup my thoughts. And not have to sprint so much. And that's what I did. I kind of I went to Portland for a week or so, and I was like, all right, I think I could do this here. And as soon as I got back, I gave myself maybe 3 months or so, 3, 4 months, and just said, all right, this is what I'm doing, and just got everything in place. And so many times where I had no clue what I was going to do. I didn't have anything lined up. Right. So a lot of being a creative is like taking risks. And when you're there at that moment of like, hey, knowing that there's an unknown that I can't necessarily account for, it's being able to trust that inner voice. And I feel like that is what has gotten me so far, is just being able to trust myself. Because usually, we're told to just doubt and like, nope, you want to make sure you take the safe route and stuff. And I have done that. I took all the steps. I went to school, did the internship, got the full-time job. I did, I was even engaged at one point where I thought that's what my life was supposed to be. And when I was not happy in that space, I realized that it was going to take an internal change that only I knew how to do.
Wow. That's incredible. First of all, I commend you for having the the ability to look within and have that self-reflection, and to raise your hand and ask for a little help, but also do a lot of the work on yourself. I mean, I heard you say that you wanted to make sure that you had appropriate reserves to say, "Hey, I'm stepping away from my job." I mean, not everyone has the luxury of being able to just walk into work one day and say, "All right, I'm out. This is it. I'm done." But a lot of people do it, but very few people are ready for it. I mean, I find that as a financial planner a lot. I'll meet people that will tell me, I'm miserable at work. I want to quit my job, and I'll say, well, wait a minute. You're going to be miserable at home if you can't keep a roof over your head, or if you can't eat, or things of that nature. And just knowing how to create what I call sort of a runway. So like an airplane, when an airplane's landing, it has to have a certain amount of runway in order to stop this high speed moving object. So it's the same way when you're at the 9 to 5, you're engaged, you're flying at 30,000 feet, and all of a sudden you say, you know what, I need to land. But if you don't have enough landing strip, you're going to in LA, you're going to crash into the ocean.
It's hard. It's hard to keep going that fast and then at a sudden stop. So that's where I knew at that point, like, all right, if I do want to do this on my own and figure this out, it's going to take some planning. Yeah. And that's where I started getting really just like, okay, start envisioning, right? Like, what does my life look like that I want to live? And how can I start laying down the foundation now? What part of the runway can I just know that I have, and then work from there? And that helped me start again, slowly transition. I wouldn't say it was like a rough stop. It was more of a transition. Like, okay, so now, leaving the job, leaving the state, trying completely in a different space. And then it, start like with small part-time stuff. So I was doing like a part-time tech assistant, again, using the skills that I have. Like, what skills do I have right now that can be just a part-time support, anything like that, as I get the rest of my stuff aligned. So once I was doing that, I had more freedom to start creating and start doing things that I loved. And again, it was a weird process because I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to just create and do stuff. And that's when I wanted to do the podcast, because it was something that I had wanted to do for so long. You ask my friends, they're like, yeah, she's been talking about it for years, right? But I don't want to be that person that just talks and doesn't walk. And so I finally sat down with myself, like, okay, we want to do this creative thing. What does this look like? What is the name of this podcast, right? And that's kind of where it started. And a friend was like, well, when's the first episode coming out? And then that's when I was like, damn, you know what? That's a really good question. And then kind of like putting some stakes in there, right? Okay, well, if that first episode doesn't come out, then what happens? Then I'm like, oh, you know what? Then I canceled my trip to Europe. And that was like a huge thing because traveling for me is huge. And he's like, all right, so if you don't get this episode out, then you are canceling your trip, right? And I'm like, oh, that trip is not getting canceled. So this episode is going to go out. And it did. And I did it for 5 weeks. And, Monday through Friday, I'd get up at 6 a.m. and just start recording. And mind you, I hadn't, this was my first podcast that I'd started. I did kind of do like a false start one time I did record an episode, but it never went out. But again, I was like, no, this is the time. I have the space.
Evie, no one knew that except you until right now. But I thank you for sharing. So I love the fact that you said you actually tried and ultimately failed. It never went out. But you were
Exactly.
able to get up, dust yourself off, and say, I can try this again. And now you have, how many episodes are you in at this point?
24 episodes. So the first season's wrapped. So in Europe, second season's coming out.
Okay. So season 2 abroad. Man, do you hear that, producers of Money Script Podcast? What are we doing? I'm sitting in the house right now while Evielution Podcast is going to be recording season 2 in Europe. We got some things to talk about. So going back to this transition that you made, and especially the, as a financial planner, I like to think about the financial aspects of it. I'm curious I'm sure you've listened to our podcast before, so you know the question is coming. But I'm
Yes.
curious to what were some of your first memories of money and just kind of how money was a part of your life to then I'm really curious how you were able to transition into making a big decision like this. I mean, tell me about your first memory of money, please, or memories. There's probably several of them.
Yeah, I would say some of the first that come to mind is like going to the swap meet with my dad. And I remember just pointing at a toy and I'm like, oh yeah, I want that one. And my dad like handing me this green paper that I had to like give to the person. I was like, oh, this is how this works. Like you just give them pieces of paper and like and then my dad had to like explain that how exchanging of things worked. But growing up, there was just never enough. So that was a huge fear that I feel like I had to overcome when I was working at the full-time job. Like, oh my gosh, if I leave this spot, then what if there's not enough? And that was something that I had to kind of like leave with my parents and like the people before me, because they didn't have the tools and resources that are available now. And, being able to ask for support, being able to have like mentors and stuff who can teach and educate me about my finances. And so I had to reprogram a lot of just, hey, that was that one point in time. Thankfully, I have a degree. I have a lot of other things that I set in motion for myself that's going to support me in more ways than one that now I can lean back on. So I think knowing that I created my own sense of safety net.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, I'm curious, and for those of you listening that do not live in Los Angeles, a swap meet is just it's the flea market. For those of you who didn't pick up on that's what it is. I don't know why they call it that because no one's swapping anything anymore. Well, I guess you are money for goods, but neither here nor there. I wanted to go back to the whole at the top of the show we were talking about, or I was mentioning this new metaverse. As a creative, are you excited about this whole metaverse or what? Or maybe you know more about what it is than I do. So can you share with us a little bit about the metaverse and why we should be excited about it?
I'm not too familiar, but it has been something that's buzzing around everywhere where people are talking about the metaverse. What I'm really excited about the future is that there's just now we can see that the possibilities are endless of what we want to create, right? If we want to if we're just like a graphic designer, like the possibilities are endless. You can work anywhere, you can do the work that you want to do. If you're a creative as, even as a musician, now are even like where you had to kind of be in one place where you can tour. And I'm like, I'm just excited for like virtual reality concerts, like
Mm,
I'm excited for what the world can look like as we continue to develop our technology. Even with filmmaking, like that's something that I've been very passionate about. And I'm working on building like some sort of cohort based course that can teach people how to make films and movies and just teach people how to create something and have something to have finalized, right? Because I attended an online writing course and it's really changed the way that I know how to create. And so I think what's really cool is seeing just what is possible out there to create. Like people are making hella money off TikTok, right? And just being able to advertise, their creative abilities or the things that they know how to do. So I think maybe this metaverse could be a really good place for people to like create their own world, right?
Yeah, maybe the metaverse is it's the next. So, we had, what was it? Well, mice. Well, actually, I'm gonna go way back. First, we had Black Planet. Not everyone. Shout out to those of you that know what Black
Not
Planet
familiar.
is.
I come into the MySpace time.
So we were right before my. I say we like I created it. But it was basically MySpace or Facebook, but it was all of the most of the members in it were attendees of historically black colleges and universities. So Black Planet. And then MySpace, and then Facebook, and then
I think
Instagram.
Instagram.
And then
Yeah.
Facebook was like, haha, Instagram, here's $1 billion, go away, or be a part of us. And then what was that other one for a minute?
Snapchat's one
No,
too.
before Snap, there was
Vine.
that one. Vine. Yeah, Facebook killed them too, apparently.
Right.
And then
Twitter.
and Twitter, of course. But Twitter was always just well, in my opinion, Twitter was more editorial, if you will.
For like publications
Yeah,
and
for
stuff and people.
publications, and you were limited. You remember for a long time you were only limited to 140 characters
40
on Twitter.
characters.
Yeah, that was funny. And then Snapchat, of course, which kind of merged all these things together, but also kind of Snapchat was always creating that alternative reality. Is it alternative reality? AR?
Augmented reality.
Augmented reality. I knew it started with a A. So you had Snapchat with the augmented reality, and then TikTok came along, which just seemed like a copycat of all the other ones, but then it just took off. I'm like, why? This I don't know, I can't keep up. And now we're gonna have metaverse, whatever that will be. So it is interesting to watch the evolution of these different mediums. So speaking of evolution, tell everyone where can they find you, your podcast, if they happen to be in the Oregon area and looking for a photographer, how do they find you?
Definitely. So my podcast is available anywhere on any streaming platform. So Spotify, Apple Podcast, Anchor. That's where it's being hosted right now. And you can find it at Evielution podcast. And on Twitter, I'm at Eviana Music, and that's where you can find me on Instagram. I will be in Europe for some time, so won't be available just yet back in Oregon. But
if you're in Europe, hey, I got some listeners in Europe. I do. There's some out there. So for my Europeans, if you're looking for someone to do some quick photos for you in the quad, Evie's going to be available. She's going to be available. And do take a listen to the Evielution podcast. It is a wonderful treat, especially for those of you who are creative. She goes through all of the steps and the setbacks that we sometimes have as creatives. She talks about when you have the creative blocks and you're unable to get through them. There was a book that you were going through that was helping you walk through
the artist's way. That was something that I kind of bring about. Like, the episodes are very, short and sweet, like maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes. So I really intended it to be something that you can just pop in the morning while you're doing your routines, that kind of thing. And I talk about things like the inner critic, my inner critic. Her name is Sally. And sometimes she can be a little, critical.
Sally's so evil.
Sally, exactly. She's evil sometimes, but it's really just a way for people who are looking to live a different way, like an alternative lifestyle to maybe what they've been used to, and realizing that it's completely accessible, that there's so many different ways to become a creative. And I would say that the second season is going to really focus on more the film industry and like how we can recreate film, because right now there's just so much going on in that space. So I really want to show that there's just ways that people can live a good life and they don't have to sacrifice all of their work or their life for work, because we realize that family is very important, and, traveling and that kind of thing. So I really want to make sure that other people realize that it's absolutely possible to create the life that they want to live.
It is possible. Well, Evie, thank you again for joining us on the Money Script podcast. Hope to see you in Europe. Maybe one day we could just do this live in another country.
That'd be perfect.
Hey, let's set
Thank you
that
so
up.
much.
Thank you. You have a wonderful, wonderful trip.
Thank you.
Well, all right, family. That was Eviana Vergara with the Evielution podcast. We really appreciate you joining us on this beautiful day, whatever the temperature is, wherever you are. I know I like to talk about the weather for some reason, just because it's so now. And speaking of now, I really encourage you to assess, where are you right now? Are you living in that 9-to-5 situation and you're just frustrated with it? Do you have an inner creative that needs to get out? Are you looking for ways to connect your creativity to ways of making money? And to do that, you're going to have to do a little soul searching. You're going to have to do some journaling. You're going to have to probably reach out to some professionals, maybe a mentor. Maybe it's a friend or a relative or someone that can support you as you're trying to make this transition so that you can live a happier, healthier life. You know, especially if you're in the 2021s, we talk a lot about mental health. Mental health is not something that just hides, in the corner somewhere anymore. And people are being a lot more vocal and standing up for themselves and saying, no, I need a mental break. I need to be able to focus on what is going to keep me as a more sane and more happy individual. So, but make sure you're reaching out, like I said, to ways that you can get support in those areas, whether it's therapists, again, mentors, doing some reading, listening to some podcasts, feeding your brain, feeding your mind, so that you can be empowered, so that you can make some better decisions for yourself. And then do us all a favor. Let's not all just jump into this whole metaverse thing just yet. Let's let it simmer a little bit and figure out what it's really going to be. I mean, if the metaverse really is the future, I don't want it to be like Vine. I don't want to get all excited about it, and then as soon as I set up my account, the whole thing gets shut down. That was no fun. I think I made one Vine, maybe two. So I do have a TikTok though. Not much is on it. It's mainly my dog is on the TikTok. I don't know why my dog's on TikTok, but it's fun to use you can use the little caption where it gives it like the electronic operator voice, and I make it look like my dog is talking. It's weird. I don't even know what my TikTok handle is, but if you find it, show my dog some love. All right, we'll see you next time on the Money Script podcast. Again, we can be found on anywhere where you listen to podcasts. Do us a favor, go over to Apple Podcasts and give us a like and a rating and tell us what you love about the show. And while you're there, go ahead and give the Evielution podcast a listen to. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Script podcast. Be sure to check out our other episodes, subscribe, follow, and give us 5 stars. Continue to send your financial questions on Twitter or Instagram at The Money Script. Go to moneyscriptwealth.com and schedule your complimentary consultation to discuss your specific goals and concerns. Financial advisory and investment management services are offered by Money Script Wealth Management PLLC, a registered investment advisory firm registered in the state of Texas and California and other states where exempt. The Money Script LLC and the Money Script Wealth Management PLLC and guests of the episode may have interest in the investments mentioned today. The opinions and views are expressed here are for informational purposes only. This material is educational in nature and should not be deemed as a solicitation for any specific product or service. All investments involve risk and a significant loss of principal. The Money Script nor Money Script Wealth Management offer tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney for specific advice about your situation. Until next time.